right. We should be online right now, right? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Well, good morning, afternoon, and good evening, even night for some of you, and a very warm welcome to this webinar on STERIKIng Pouches for Robotic Instruments. My name is Jyri Mäkinen, and I'm working as a global sales manager for STERIKIng branded products of Vipac. And our moderator today is my colleague, Hanna Marttila. She's our product manager, and she will be overseeing the chat today. So you can write your questions to the chat box during this webinar. And then after each presentation that we're going to have today, Hanna has been collecting some of your questions and we will be answering those. And then because there are probably more questions than we can answer at that time, then we will be collecting all of your questions and answering the rest of the questions after this event. We will also have some polls during the presentations. So there will be multiple choice menu there, and you can answer those by choosing your option. And then on top of this, there will be some materials that are shared in the end of the presentations. But we are not here alone today from Vipac side, but we have also two invited speakers, and it's our great pleasure to have invited speaker Bart Gabriel from Maria Middelares Hospital from Belgium. He and his team has been using our robotic pouches in their hospital now for about 2-3 years, and he will be sharing some of the experiences that they have had with the pouches. And Bart is the deputy chief of the department there, and he's been in CSSD for 15 years at the moment, so having a pretty long experience from that. And he's also board member of the local sterilization organization called VSG, and they are actually one of those organizers next year that there will be a global conference in Brussels, and he will be in the organizing committee there. Our second professional speaker today is Mrs. Christine Böhner. She's coming from Intuitive company, so from the company who is actually manufacturing Vinci robots and the instruments that are used together with those. And Christine has been with Intuitive since 2019, and she has a PhD in chemistry from Cambridge University, and she's been working as a CSSD manager for European hospitals and also some hospitals in United States, so having quite a good background for the topics that she will be talking about today. So basically her topic will be around reprocessing Vinci instruments, and she will be looking at the steps that are needed to be done and taken into consideration when doing that. But before letting our invited speakers to talk, I will give you a short introduction on our pouches and why we ended up developing them, and then also giving you a couple of words about our company to start with. So if you have any questions, then please type them in, and you are very much welcome again. If I did not mention that in the beginning, we have people registered from 50 countries, so it's a quite nice attendance today. Let's start a little bit about the Vipac. So I am representing Vipac, Hanna is representing Vipac, and Vipac is part of Vihuri packaging company. And Vihuri family actually owns us, and then Vipac is actually manufacturer of the packaging materials, and we have multiple manufacturing locations in Europe and one in China. And then we have in our Northern America, we have our sister company Vinpac, who has also multiple manufacturing facilities there. And then we are together forming Vihuri Packaging. And because these manufacturing facilities are producing medical packaging and food packaging, then we are serving our medical customers under umbrella of VCare. So VCare organization is consisting of sales, marketing, R&D, product management, regulatory people who are really needed in medical business. And then the products that we're talking about today, STERIKING products, they are actually STERIKING branded, and those are sold to healthcare facilities. So basically hospitals, dental clinics, and all other places where you need sterilization packaging. We have about 4,200 people in our company, and our turnover last year altogether was about $1.5 billion. And these STERIKING products that we talk about today, we're selling in about 100 countries through 300 distributors, and we do materials for more than 1 billion packages in a year, so sterilization packages in a year, so quite a big number. And what is important for us is coming clear from the slogans that we have. So actually the slogan for STERIKING products has been for years already, "We care that you pack safely." And then for We Care part of the business, we have Together for Safe Packaging. And then this part of the business is actually including our customers in medical device industry and pharmaceutical side as well. So really for the hospital side and dental clinics and such healthcare facilities, we make sterilization pouches, we make wrapping sheets, we make rolls, we make tray liners, monitoring products, sealers, cutters, all kinds of accessories which are needed in CSSD. But then to the actual topic. So we have a new product which is called STERIKING Pouch for Robotic Instruments. For some of you, it's very new. For some of you, you have been using it already for some time. Here is the picture of Vinci surgical system. And Christine is going to tell more about this part, but I wanted to bring out that hospitals are making robotic assisted surgeries, and then they do it with such a system where you have a console that surgeon is operating, and then you have patient side card where you have 4 robotic arms where you attach instruments. And then these robots, I don't know exact cost, but they are pretty, let's say, expensive. They're about $2 million and more. Then there are instruments that are used together with the robot. So you attach these instruments to the arms, and then they are typically quite long, 55 to 70 centimeters in length. And I would say that really all of them, almost all of them are sterilized by steam, and then only the optics go to hydrogen peroxide plasma or hydrogen peroxide process. Instruments are reasonably high in cost, like instruments usually are. And then what is important to know from sterilization point of view or reprocessing point of view is that these are used only or can be used only specified number of times. So you can use or reprocess them only certain number of times. After each use, you need to reprocess the instruments. And again, this is the part that Christine is going to tell you more. And there are a lot of different steps that you need to know in this. What we are looking from Vipak side, we are specialists in packaging, sterilization packaging. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of background that how we ended up having this product. Then I started by looking at what are the, let's say, the current ways or the earlier ways of packing robotic instruments in our hospitals. And then one very common way that we see is to put multiple instruments into the tray and then wrap it, or then put multiple instruments into the tray and then put it into the container and close the container lid. And this will be probably and will be needed also in the future. But then possible challenges with this is that if you are putting more instruments into the tray that you are using in actual operation, then you end up sterilizing or reprocessing instruments which have not been actually used in operation. Because of course, after opening the container or opening the wrapping tray, then you need to reprocess everything. And every time you reprocess them, of course, there will be a devaluation of the instrument. So basically, it's waste of the instruments because, again, you can only sterilize them or reprocess them certain number of times. Another way that you see people packing robotic instruments in hospitals is to wrap single items or then cut pouches from the rolls. And then if you are wrapping single items, it's time consuming to wrap them. And then you cannot actually see into the wrap what it is. And of course, to do the wrapping every time the same way is also challenging, because how do you make sure that every people is doing it the same way and that is done properly? And then when you are using pieces from rolls as pouches, there has been some challenges that sometimes these rolls have not been strong enough, so sharp parts of the instruments actually puncture through the material, and then of course you would need to reprocess again. Because of these challenges, then we have got a lot of requirements from the market that we should do peel pouch, which is fitting the robotic instruments. And then as a background, in 2017, we got one of these requests from Sweden, and we started to develop some prototypes here in Finland at our factory together with our R&D. And then we made some prototypes and took them to Sweden, and then we took them also to United States to our distributor, who was then actually having some connections to Intuitive, who is then manufacturer of these robots and the instruments. And we started to develop together a pouch that would be accommodating all different sizes of Da Vinci instruments. So that was our target. We wanted to have, of course, patient safety solution that is providing the sterile barrier in the first place, because these are sterilization packaging. As said, we wanted to have size of the pouch which is accommodating all the different instrument sizes that Da Vinci is having or Intuitive is having. And we recognize the need that we need to have a product which is very good in strength, that it will be then, the barrier will not be compromised during transportation, handling, or storage when they are moved in the hospitals. Of course, other important aspects that we were looking at was also that we need to have a good aseptic opening. So you should not get any fibers coming out when you open it, and then you would need to be able to take the instrument out from the bag at the point of use so that it's not contaminated. We knew that if we are able to do a pouch for this, we knew that it will be faster packaging process, and then the requirement was also this design for double pouching. A lot of the hospitals are using double pouching in any case, but in this case it was even more important just to make sure that the barrier will be enough even in tougher conditions. After a lot of different prototypes and trials, we ended up having the combination where we took 100-gram reinforced steam paper, which is providing actually 100% better tear and tensile strength than typical paper laminate products from us. not to speak about some others who are using thinner papers. And then we had the possibility with this paper that we get a puncture resistance, which is 2.5 times better than with the normal paper laminates. And this together with the 9-layer laminate that we have in our pouches was giving really very good strength for the pouch. And not only the strength, but really great peelability. So it's stiff enough, this paper, that once you open it, it's easy to open, and it's very clean opening in this. So how do we then, what would be then the sizes? The sizes that we made in the end were basing on the instrument sizes that are coming from Intuitive. And basically, we have two heat sealable pouches, the ones here on the top, SDV10 and SDV20, and then two self-seal pouches in the bottom, SSDV10 and SSDV20. And these are designed to use as double pouching solution in a hospital. But of course, it was not enough to do only right size of the pouch, which is strong enough and having good aseptic opening and so on. But obviously we needed to test that all these properties are according to the needs, so that it needs to provide sterile barrier. And we tested the product in Iseka laboratory in Germany to be compliant with ISO 11607 and EN 868 Part 5. And then in United States, we made steam sterilant penetration testing for the pouches at Lexamed. And it was done in the so-called half cycle, where the holding time in the sterilization is cut into half from the minimum holding time mentioned in the standard. So in this half of the time, actually the steam that goes into the pouch need to kill the microbes and spores on the instruments. And it did, of course. And we validated for single pouch use and for double pouch using. So this half cycle was working even if we do double pouching. Steam will go into the pouch. It will kill the microbes and spores, even in this worst case scenario, like half cycle. We studied this, of course, for heat seal and self-seal pouches both. Then Lexamed was testing also the self-life after the sterilization, and we did some microbial aerosol testing in high power laboratories in United States, where they are basically bombing the material with certain spores and then seeing that those spores are not getting into the pouch. Biocompatibility testing was done so that nothing harmful is coming off from the pouches, which would be contaminating the instruments. After all, these instruments, they go inside a human being, and nothing should come off from the pouch. And then Intuitive Surgical was doing their own testing, so steam efficacy testing and drying time testing in their facilities, United States. About the drying time, maybe would like to mention that, of course, in the drying test, it's been tested that the product which is packed together with the packaging is not heavier after the sterilization, so that there's no any moisture in the product after the sterilization. And in this case, the weight after the sterilization was on the same level as before sterilization or even lower. So this is drying very well in the process. Then Intuitive was also doing adaptation validation study for more than 200 instruments and accessories. And we have a full list of instruments that are what you can pack into the pouches available, and you can have it on request. Here is some instruments mentioned here, which I picked up from the list, or some instrument categories which I picked up from the list. Then we added also some special technology to the pouch, which cannot be seen in the hospital, but we actually print a hidden Digimark barcode on the top of the pouch. And if you are downloading the app from Google Play or App Store, there's a free app called Digimark. You can scan this upper part of the pouch, and it will take you to a video that is showing how these pouches are used in the hospital setting. This video, unfortunately, is not showing in this webinar platform, so you cannot see it here, but we will send you, all of you, the link to the video after this presentation. When now we have already some experience from pouches from certain markets, or let's say from quite many markets, then how we see that what kind of benefits this pouch have brought to our customers in hospitals, then is that the first is that it's clearly easing the daily work in the hospital. So really the packing process itself is fast and it's efficient. Then it's also lowering the cost of instruments and reprocessing, because when you are packing single instruments into these pouches, there will be less waste of instruments due to these reprocessing limitations that there are. If you are, for example, allowed to reprocess one instrument 15 times, you want to avoid these unnecessary reprocessing cycles. So, and you can avoid it when you are pouching single instruments, because then you only use the instruments which are needed. While if you have wrapped them or something, everything inside this tray will need to be reprocessed again, as I told before. Of course, at the same time, you are saving resources. I have talked to many different distributors and end customers in many countries, and a lot of the people are saying that there's a lack of personnel, there's not enough personnel available at the moment in the hospitals. Then time is one of the most valuable resources that you have, and then labor. So if you can cut down the time that you use in packaging, of course, it's worthwhile. The same with consumables. We are talking about sustainability matters much more these days. We don't want to use water, energy, packaging materials more than needed. And of course, top of all, when packing single instruments, then it's improving the patient safety, because you can validate the packing process, and it's giving you the longer shelf life. You can see into the pack and so on. About this fast and efficient claim, then unfortunately now this video is not showing. I'm sorry about this. It's a little bit surprise for us as well, but then again you will get the link to this. But basically, when you are wrapping, doing a single wrap using one-step type of the structure, so bonded wrap structure, it takes about the double time compared to double pouching with the sealer. And then again, when you are doing wrapping, you often need some additional things inside, like some liners or towels, indicators. You need tape to close it. And then again, when new person is coming, you need to teach how to do the wrapping properly and so on. While, of course, you need to teach the sealing as well, but it's, let's say, it's done the same way every time, because it's repeatedly done by the machine. We have a lot of references, of course, and I took only one of them here today. So Böhner University Hospital in France, they have 4 Da Vinci robots in use today, and they're doing 6 different specialties inside the hospital. And they are using our heat sealable, so SDV pouches for robotic instruments in their hospital. And they have told our distributor in that country that they appreciate especially the time that is saved in the packing. or packaging. And they can save this time mainly because all the sizes are fitting into the same pouches, and they are really fitting these Vinci robotic instruments. They also told that it's helpful for them because they can use the same sealer and the same sealing parameters as they use with normal paper laminates. So no need to adjust the temperature for something else. And then we also, a little bit even surprisingly, we have heard this from other hospitals as well, that we have a small logo in top of the pouch, which is showing that which direction you put the instrument inside the pouch. So when you are doing a lot of things and you need to do it fast, it's helpful that you see which way you put the instrument inside. These are the comments from hospital. Here is still some pictures from Porter. So they are using double pouching. They always do in France. And here you can see XI instruments packed. So basically SDV10, the smaller pouch, you put the instrument inside, you seal it, and then place it into the bigger pouch and seal it again. And then they are doing the same for SI instruments as well. So same combination, works well, looks good, easy to recognize which instrument you have inside. On top of the robotic instruments, a lot of the customers have told that they've been able to use it for other applications as well, like different laparoscopic instruments, guide wires, some long sharp items, surgical rods and such, some biopsy instruments and so on that they have been packing into these same pouches. So basically this is for any kind of a long devices which are fitting into this pouch. To wrap up the key points from our side as a manufacturer, we think that packing robotic instruments individually are improving the patient safety. And then basically it's reducing the amount you are paying for instruments because simply you can avoid these unnecessary reprocessing cycles. And this will be lowering, therefore, your cost of materials and consumables as well. And when you are packing, it's double. Let's say it's only half of the time that you need to put them into the double pouch than into wrapping, even probably less than half of the time. And then if you are using rolls, you are also getting this time advantages. And again, this is validated for more than 200 Vinci instruments and accessories. This was pretty much my part today. And now it's time for the questions. If you don't have a question today, then you can still do also questions later on. We have here steriking@vipac.com. It's our mailbox. You can make questions there. Of course, you can always ask questions from our wonderful distributors around the world. And then if you're looking at some IFUs, like instructions for use or some videos, how to do things, you can find these videos from steriking.com. And then also these videos and a lot of other things we are sharing through social media. So we are in LinkedIn and Instagram, and you are very much welcome to follow us if you are not following already today. Now, Hanna, is there any questions already during the presentation maybe? Or?
Yes, thank you, Jyri, for the really good presentation. And I could raise a few questions. The first one would be that assuming the storage and handling systems with the standards and good clinical practice, how long can your pouch hold the sterility? And this was a question regarding Robert and Jan were interested about this topic.
Okay, yeah. Well, according to Lexamed study, then the sterility after sterilization, the shelf life after the sterilization is up to 3 years. So if you would be keeping them in good and recommended storing conditions, and the conditions in your hospitals are within this range, then the study says 3 years after sterilization. And then I know that there are a lot of different guidelines in different countries. So in some countries, guideline is that, okay, everything that you sterilize in the peel pouch can go on the shelf for 1 year. Some countries is saying it's only half a year. And then some countries are saying that it's event related and depending on the studies that have been made for the product. But with our product, it's been tested for heat seal version, that is 3 years after the sterilization at the moment. And with self-seal version, it's 1 year at the moment. And then we are on the way to extend it to 3 years, and we will see how it works with the self-seal. But heat seal, 3 years, self-seal, 1 year at the moment.
Thank you for the answer. I would still raise another question from Marion. Is it necessary to double pack the robotic instruments in the pouch?
No, if you are thinking about the barrier, then the barrier properties are good, even if you use just a single pouch. But then there are certain benefits if you're doing double pouching. So let's think about the situation that you are taking instruments which are packed into the operating room or close to the operating room. Then basically when you take them, if you are not using them during the operation, you could, okay, depending on national regulations and everything, you could actually take this double pouch out from the teeter after the process and then peel off the outer layer and still put the inner layer onto the shelf if you use double pouching. If you use single pouching, then you cannot take it from operating room back to the sterile storage. Of course, you could keep it in the operating room if there is room to keep it, or maybe there are some other practices that you have those pouches back close to the operating theater and then you just move the needed pouches from there to the operations, which ones you need. But that's one of the benefits. And then of course, another thing is this aseptic opening kind of things, that if you want to take the outer pack out first and then you can move the inner pouch into the sterile area because it's sterile. And then if you have very tough transportation conditions or some, then we have basically then 2 layers which are protecting the sterility of the item when you have double pouching. But to answer the question, no, it's not necessary. You can use just single layer if that is the best for the practice. So the studies have been made both for 1 layer packaging and a double layer packaging. And barrier properties are excellent with both, like really very good results from that.
Perfect. Thank you for the answering. In the chat, there is still one question that I could raise, that what's the validation of robotic pouch in days, as days?
Validation meaning that maybe we're talking about the same shelf life or
Yes, I would imagine, yes.
Oh. So validation studies are showing 3 years for heat sealable pouch after the sterilization, and then 1 year for self-seal at the moment, and we are in a way to extend it to 3 years. So that is the validation study saying this. All right, well then, thank you very much for this. And if you have any more questions that maybe you want to do it, then please send these questions after the presentation. And maybe there were more questions in the chat box. and we will be collecting those together and making a package that we will be sending all of you after the webinar, when we have been having a longer look at them and possibility to do that. Now, I'm going to give the floor to Bart. So Bart is coming from Belgium, and he's going to use my computer and my headphones today. So Bart is jumping in, so you will see the different face soon.
Thank you, Jiri. Also from me, good morning, good afternoon, good night. Let me tell me in front to excuse me, because English is not my native language. So if I make some mistakes, I'm sorry in front. I'm working in Gent. This is our hospital. Gent is in the north side of Belgium. It's the capital of Eastern Flanders. Gent has about 260,000 inhabitants. And in Gent, there are 4 hospitals. In the 4 hospitals, there are 6 Da Vinci robots. In Gent area, there are about 3,000 hospital beds. Maria Middelares, for Belgian standards, we are a middle big hospital with 641 beds, about 220 medical doctors, and about 2,000 co-workers. So that's me, Bart Gabriel. I'm 52 years old. I work for 15 years in CSSD. I'm a board member of VSZ. It's the Flemish CSSD organization. I'm a lean expert, and I have an American and, a German certification. The biggest challenge in my career of 15 years was the preparation for the moving into the new CSSD. That's about 7 years ago. That's a picture of our CSSD. You can see that our numbers of reprocessing instruments are really climbing. We have about 31 co-workers at our CSSD. In June this year, we will be over 30,000 sets we have reproduced. For assembly, we have 9 assembling tables, and for packing tables, we wrap in sheets because we have no containers. I really don't know if there is any hospital in Belgium who is wrapping, who is using containers. We process about 300 pouches a day. We use for the pouch for the sealers. We have 3 sealers to seal our pouches. 2 for the pouches for the autoclaves, and 1 to seal the stirret, so the TIFAC. For both, we use pouches and reels. Each day we run about 50 charges in our autoclaves. We have 5 big ones and 1 small one, and 1 stirret, the 100 NX. The stirret is used 2 or 3 times a day. A cycle in our autoclave is about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Robotic interventions. You can see in 2017 we did almost 400. 2021, 515. There is a hospital near Gent, Azat St. Vincentius in Deinze. We work together with them because in Deinze they don't have a washer that is big enough, and yeah, so the used robotic instruments come to Maria Middelares. Before the robotic instruments come to CSSD, the tip of each instrument is put into a distal duct. It's a liquid to yeah, it's for the tip, yeah. When it comes to CSSD, we flush manually the two ports of each instrument, and then the robotic arm goes for about half an hour in our ultrasonic device. On the left, you can see our ultrasonic device. On the right, there's a rack to put our robotic arms on it, and it goes for about 1.5 hours in our washer disinfector. So, packing. Before we used the special pouches of STERIKING, we had to cut our rolls. So cut 2 times, seal 4 times. I made a calculation, packing material not included. Gross staff cost is about 35 euros an hour. Double pack 1 instrument was about 1 minute. So in 2021, we packed 728 instruments separately. So that's 11 and a half hour, is about 400 euros. Current situation, double packing in the STERIKING robotic pouches. We have to seal only 2 times. We don't have to cut the rolls. So handling cost, gross staff cost is also 35 euros an hour. Double packing is about half a minute. So 728 instruments is 6 hours is 210 euros. So you can see it's about half the price. Current situation, the advantage of packing in the pouches. It's the same sealing device. It's low handling cost. At the OR, we have about 15 different arms. The difference in the pouches is easy to see. The pouches are strong, they are easy to open, and they have a shelf life of 1 year. Here you can see the guards nearby the operating room where the robotic interventions are being performed. There's less damage, almost no perforated pouches, so less reprocessing or unused instruments. It's high visible, and yeah, instruments are available from the cards. More advantages, the pouches are not exclusive for robotic arms. We use them also for clippers, for hammers, for long, sharp instruments, and so on. We have less ruptures and perforations because of excellent quality, higher grams of the paper. We have a long shelf life of 1 year. We use plastic boxes for the cooperation with the other hospital. It's safe transport between the two hospitals. We had no ruptures in the 2 years we work together now. Conclusion, the quality is higher. It's a safe packaging. It's easy to use. It's faster, and we are saving time. So I hope to see you next year in October for the WFHSS Congress in Brussels. I hope there are some questions.
Yes, thank you for a really good presentation. The first one would be that when you are counting the sterilized trays, could you confirm that are you meaning the DIN trays or sterile trays and packages?
Not DIN. It's the number of trays. So half DIN is also counting as one. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Then there would be a other one. It's a more specific question that do you know the software system that you are using to print the labels?
We are now using a system that's called SteriPro, but we are leaving this software to go something new, something better, something that increases our traceability. Okay. And maybe it's working in other countries too. It's called iAxis, the Steriline.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. There is no other questions in the chat, but they are of course welcome afterwards also.
Yes, of course.
There is from Lawrence, there is a great presentation, and thank you for the good presentation.
Yeah, bye.
So Christine, are you ready?
Yes, I am. The microphone is unmuted.
Mine or?
Mine is unmuted. I'm ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Oh, go ahead. Your turn now.
Fabulous. Then thank you very much for inviting me to speak in this forum. It's great that I get the opportunity to talk to you all about reprocessing of our instruments. And to give a quick introduction about myself, my name is Christine Böhner, and I've been with Intuitive for about 3 years now, as Yuri was already saying. And before, I was actually a customer of Intuitive. So we've been reprocessing SI and XI in the department I was managing at the time. And so now in my current role, I'm leading a team of dedicated reprocessing specialists in our European direct markets. So what I would like to speak to you about, let's see if that works. It works. Wonderful. Is to give you a brief overview over the Da Vinci instruments and then an introduction of what reprocessing support we are providing at this moment of time to our customers, and also then really going into the detailed steps of the instrument reprocessing. And then at the end, I have some 2 small but also powerful best practice ideas that you might find useful. And then if you have any questions, obviously, I will answer some more questions. So starting off with the overview of our instruments. So as you can see, over time, we have advanced our system, and you can see all the various generations and how it has progressed at the end with the SI that some of you may know or have, and then the XI and the X system, and then in the US in 2018, the SP system. It's not yet available in all markets, but I still wanted to show that it is already existing, and obviously there's more to come. But also with those systems, there are specific instruments needed to perform the procedures. And here I just have the 5 categories: the grab instruments, we have cutting instruments, needle drivers, monopolar cautery instruments, bipolar cautery instruments, with a couple of examples. Overall, we have over 70 EndoWrist instruments that can be used with our systems. And there are various features to give the user control and flexibility to use them. So just to give you some examples, there's the motion scaling, as you can see on the right side of the screen, or tremor filtration, or the 7 degrees of freedom, moving the arm and the instrument around, the articulation and the degree of rotation that is actually more than a human hand can do. And with that allows the user a precise working at the tissue that they would like to work on, but also the navigation around blood vessel, nerves, and easier access to where they have to go, and then leaving less trauma for the patient, which is at the end what we want to achieve. Now, in this presentation, I want to mainly focus on the instruments, because this is a webinar about pouches, and also mainly the XI instruments. Here's though a comparison of the SI and the XI instruments. The main difference, as you can see, the housing, but also the length. The SI instrument, the longest instrument is 58 centimeters, and the longest XI instrument is 66 centimeters. From a shaft and a tip perspective, they're very, very similar build. However, you can already see the difference in the housing, the XI white and the SI blue. And apologies, no, it stopped, wonderful. So, and now going a bit more into what actually is in the housing, you can see a maximum use indicator, which is not existent on the SI instrumentation. And that indicator shows when the instrument has reached its maximum uses, when it turns red. So if you see a dot on the instrument, that means it has exceeded its uses and cannot be put on the robot again. Then there's the grip release socket. For the cautery instruments, there is the cautery cord interface where you can attach the cords. And then very important for reprocessing. Sorry, I hope everyone is still there. Very important for reprocessing are the flush ports. There are 2 flush ports, 1 and 2. And then on the other side, you can see the tips. Obviously, the tip is different for each of the instruments, but the principle is the same. There's the wrist, which will then lead into the tip. And with all the design and the thoughts that went into the design of those instruments to allow all those various features that I've just shown you, there was also put the thought in how we can reprocess it to make sure that they can be cleaned appropriately. And now I would like to go into our reprocessing support. Very high level what my team is doing. And this is basically the 3 pillars of support. One is the new system support, where we do a consultation to make sure to identify with the customer what equipment might be needed for the reprocessing, then if need be, establish the contact with a third-party company, and then of course the training of the SPD and OR, and then in some areas there is also some validation support before start. And then for existing customers, there might be some needs for refresher training, annual site support to discuss what has come up, if there are any questions or concerns, and if there's anything that we can help with optimization of the process, and general for any support for the sales team that we can deliver. And then also another pillar is to look at what instruments have been returned. Can we see a trend? Are there any complaints that we should help out? We look at the process. Is there something that we can see? And then try to find with our Da Vinci customers a solution to the problem. And this is probably something that you have all seen before, the reprocessing life cycle. And so the instrument, as every instrument, goes through the cycle, goes through various departments, areas, and also different handling steps. Same for the, and at this point, I want to say for reprocessing purposes, the XI and the SI instrument, though from the housing they look different, the steps are exactly the same. And we support our customers or intuitive Da Vinci users with, let me go back to that was too quick, with guidance throughout this whole cycle with our manuals and the IFUs that we are providing. There's some training opportunities and training modules also through our intuitive learning module that are available for intuitive or Da Vinci users to learn and train on. So now specifically for reprocessing, and I think you all have probably seen these, this is our XI reprocessing instructions, and there is something for the instrument, for the endoscope, for the accessories, and then appendices with some additional information. And for the SI instruments, we also have the same, but they look green. Also, with each system that is delivered, you get a hard copy of that together with some wall charts that you can use and maybe hang up in areas where your team can look at it and get a reminder of what they need to do. Now, going really into the depth, this is an excerpt out of our IFUs, and it highlights the two validated processes from us for, and I should say this, outside the US. There's the manual process on the left-hand side, and then the automated process on the right-hand side. And the main difference here is, as you can see, the OR step is the same. The clean side is the step. It's mainly the dirty side where there are some deviations. The main difference for the automated cleaning is that a washer disinfector is being used, and you've seen some great pictures in the previous presentation with a load carrier that is utilized for the cycle. And if you go back to the manual cleaning, for the manual cleaning, no washer disinfector is used. However, a ultrasonic is mandatory, while for the automated process, an ultrasonic is not mandatory from our side. It is optional to be used. Now, in this presentation, and because for Europe also the automated pathway is the most commonly used one, I will focus on that, but always give hints to the manual cleaning process for those countries that might follow the manual cleaning process. Excuse me. Here you can see again the excerpt of the process steps in all the different areas, and how we have validated this is that within 60 minutes after the end of procedure, either the prime and wet step has to happen or the start of the cleaning in the dirty side of the CSSD. So now we are at the stage to go through the instrument reprocessing, and unfortunately, there is a lot to tell and much to say about this. We don't have that much time to go through everything, so sometimes I will go high level over things, but of course, if there are any questions, we can do this afterwards, and if you can email as well. So I already mentioned it starts in the OR, but it actually doesn't start after the procedure. It starts during the procedure. And we call it the 3 Ws. It's the wipe, wet, and wrap. During the procedure, it's really important to already start keeping the instruments moist. It's wiping the instrument tip, wet a towel, and then wrap it around the tip so that while the instrument is not used or it has finished its use and is waiting until the end of the procedure, that it is not drying out. And here you can see some cool practice, and you can already see how the blood and tissue has caked onto the instrument tips. And you will all know that if that has to be reprocessed, it's very hard, and potentially some more abrasive techniques have to be used to get all this debris off. So I briefly want to go over the main steps of the point of use preparation. And so it starts off with removing all the accessories. And this is quite an important step. And that's where the work of the CSSD together with the OR is quite important, that there's a good system in place that works for both. Because, for example, removing the accessories, taking off the sheaths of the MCS, but also the stapler, if you have a facility that uses the stapler, is quite important. There is a removal tool that often the OR has. And so if you don't have it in the CSSD and you do need it, it is worth asking that you get some of those removal tools as well. Then we've already spoken about the indicator. Check the indicator after use. Has the instrument reached its maximum uses? Then it can be discarded according to hospital policy and doesn't have to be reprocessed anymore. Then the instrument should be wiped down, that there's no more gross contamination. And then the next step is the prime and wet. And actually, that prime and wet step is one of the most critical steps here as well. And you already see a syringe with 15 milliliters of liquid that can be water or an enzymatic neutral detergent that is going into flash port 1. And to give you a bit more information, flash port 1 is going directly into the shaft, and priming through flash port 1 with those 15 milliliters will basically fill up the shaft to ensure that it is staying moist until it can be reprocessed again in the CSSD department. The other part of keeping of prime and wet is to keep the tip moist. And I was very happy when Bart mentioned that he's using his in his facility the distillate duck, a wet set. That is one of the options to keep the tips of the instrument moist. There's also an option to use a towel, or you can use a spray. Whatever method you're using, it is though very important to follow the prime and wet step. Depending on the jurisdiction or the region you're working in, there might then be a chemical pre-disinfection, or if that is not required, that is also an optional step, and then the transport to the CSSD. So now we're moving from the OR to the CSSD. And here again, I mentioned that each Da Vinci customer will get a manual and also some wall charts for reprocessing. And here you can see an excerpt of the wall chart for automated reprocessing and the manual reprocessing. And if we look through the first couple of steps, it is exactly the same. Where it then starts to differ is after the brushing and rinsing. For the automated pathway, it goes into the washer disinfector, while for in the manual cleaning, it will go into the ultrasonic before it goes then either thermally disinfected, that is optional, or directly then into the clean room. So let's start with the first step. Again, removing the accessories. In case you still find some, for example, here the sheaths still on the instruments, it's really important to have that step to double check that actually it is removed before you start the cleaning process, because if it is still left on there, the cleaning will not happen in the right way and it will have to be redone. Second step to double check, is the indicator red or still white, so that you can avoid reprocessing something where there's no need. Then prepare the solution. Again, it depends on what detergent you're having. We recommend something that is in between a neutral and mildly alkaline pH, which is 7 to 11. And we do caution for the use of acidic cleaning agents, which means that they have a pH lower than 7. Strongly alkaline detergents, meaning they have a pH larger than 11, bleach-based and hydrogen peroxide-based cleaning agents. And then also rinse aid is something that we caution for its use because it has an effect on the instruments and can lead to damage. Once the solution is prepared, we can start with the priming. And the priming is very similar to what has happened in the OR. It's injecting 15 milliliters of the cleaning solution in the primary flush port. If you remember the primary flush port, that's the one that goes into the shaft and fills the shaft. And then there's a soaking step for 30 minutes where the instrument is fully submerged. After that, we go to the flushing step. And now both flush ports are flushed. Flush port 1 with cold water. And very important here is also that while you flush, that the tip is rotated to make sure that all the cables move through the tip and also the seal that avoids having, that reduces the amount of blood that can go into the instrument so that everything is cleaned out of there. And then after that, it's flush port 2. And as I mentioned, flush port 2 is the housing. And that is also flushed for 20 seconds. And in both cases, if the water does not run clear, it needs to be prolonged until the water runs clear after the flushing step. Now, let me see if that is... It doesn't seem to be working. There was a video, but we will skip that then and move to step 7, the spraying. And you have seen in the picture from the last presentation, actually, the blue hose, which can be used to spray the entire tip with cold water or pressurized cold water for at least 30 seconds, while also moving the tip around to make sure that you get at it from all angles and can remove any possible tissue, debris, or remaining blood. And then the 8th step is the brushing. So the entire instrument is being brushed off with a soft nylon brush, and that takes about 60 seconds. And you can either do this submerged under cold water or running water. I personally always say submerged. That's my preference, because then you can avoid the formation of aerosols. Now moving to the next step, the rinsing step. You rinse the instrument off under cold water. Then there's a final inspection in decon, if possible with magnification of 4 times. And then it goes into the automated or in the washer disinfector for automated cleaning. And going into a bit more into detail for the inspection. So here you can see some examples to look out for. So one is, are there still any accessories on it? For example, here you can see the sheath still on the MCS. If you do see that, obviously it has to be removed because the cleaning cannot be done appropriately if it is still on. Then also if you see cables that are loose or broken, or if you have misaligned jars, those are instruments, when you see that, they should be sent back and not be reused anymore. For the MCS with the sheath, it just has to be cleaned, obviously, and then it can be used. So we already spoke about the chemicals and the compatibility of chemicals. I just want to highlight this once more and then also show you some pictures why this is important. And I want to emphasize the recommendation for a pH or for a detergent with a pH of 7 to 11 and to avoid the use of hydrogen peroxide, bleach-based chemicals, strongly alkaline chemicals, also saline solution. And I forgot to mention that that is in particular important for the OR, where quite often they have saline solution available. But saline solution, as with all the other instruments, can lead to corrosion, and that is something that should be avoided. And in particular for the automated pathway, where in some countries rinse aid is being used, the rinse aid is not reacting well with our instruments and that should be avoided. As well as even if you use the correct detergent in the correct pH, but the exposure time exceeds highly what the manufacturer recommends, that could also lead to damage. So that is something to keep in mind. Now here you can see some examples what the wrong chemical could do. And the first two examples, that's actually due to rinse aid. And you can see how the plastic is cracked. And in the second picture, how the input disc has broken off. And so if you see this in your facility, this could be an indication that there is a chemical issue and it's worth looking into. And on the right-hand side, you can see some broken tips with frayed cables, and that actually was due to the use of hydrogen peroxide. That can have an effect on the instruments like this. So I hope that put things a bit into pictures and why it's important to look at our recommendations, because there's a reason why we avoid the use of rinse aid, for example. Okay, now that we have passed the dirty side, we are moving into the clean side of the department. And here you can see again the wall chart that is available. And there again, there are universal steps for all the different instruments. Then you can see it's a bit small, I have to say, but you can still see vaguely. You can see for the different instruments, the lubrication points, where to go exactly for the stapler and all the other instruments, and then also some sterilization information. But now going to the universal steps for cleaning, you can see drying, final inspection, lubrication, and we'll go through those in a second in more detail. I'm very quick with pressing my next button. So the first step, drying. If the instruments are still wet, it is definitely important to drain all the water, dry the surfaces, and also if need be, or if you have it available, to use clean dry air to ensure that the instruments are dry. And then final inspection. We've already spoken about this on the dirty side, but also there is a final inspection step at the clean side. And here you can again see some examples of what to look out for. For example, a cable that is protruding. It's not ripped, but it certainly is not the way it should be. So this instrument should not be sterilized and sent back to the OR for use. Or on the other side, you have some frayed and ripped cables. That is also something to be aware of. Then you see some very misaligned jaws, which again should lead to the instrument being taken out of circulation and returned to us. And here's also an example while we're at the clean room, and maybe there is some time left and the instrument cannot be processed further immediately, but how they're stored and also transported is quite important. And as you can see in the picture, this could easily lead to damage of the instruments, the shaft, and also the tip. And I'm just having this scenario. If you imagine you have a stainless steel trolley and you walk past with this trolley along the line of the shelving area, you can already see how this can damage the tips and even damage and crack the shaft, which is something that should really be avoided and can easily be avoided. Okay, then we go to the next step, lubrication. And if you remember on the wall chart, it actually shows where the lubrication should take place. And it's about 1 to 2 drops of the lubricant. And then we move on to the next. It is being packed and wrapped. And there are 3 different methods. You can either wrap the tray, you can use a container, or you can use a peel pouch. And then final step, sterilization. And that is dependent on what you have in your facility. And here you can see the general parameters, but we do have, and you see the small on the bottom, maximum validated temperatures of 137 degrees, and also our maximum validated sterilization time of 18 minutes, which in some jurisdiction is reached. And so we have validated up to those maximum values. And then the next step in our cycle is the storage, and then it should all items should be stored in a clean and dry place. As you can see here, there are different ways of storing instruments, trays, and you all have your own system. These are just some examples. And I just want to highlight one thing in regards to peel pouches, since we're also talking about peel pouches in this webinar. You can see the middle picture where the peel pouches are hanging and the housing is towards the bottom. And on the right-hand side, the housing is actually on the top and the tips on the bottom. So this is something to be a bit careful about, because the pressure and the weight of the whole instrument lies on the tip, and it could then pierce through the sterile wrapping, through the peel pouch, which would lead to it being unsterile and has to be reprocessed. Sorry about that. And that is something that can be avoided. On top, it could also lead to damage on the tip. Good. And it was already mentioned earlier in this webinar. I just want to go a little bit more into depth and give you some information about the reprocessing cycles and uses. So in our appendices, and you can see on the right hand an excerpt in our out of our appendices, you find all the different instruments with the number of uses and also the number of reprocessing cycles. And there's kind of a rule of thumb: the number of uses plus 5 gives you the reprocessing cycles that the instrument has. And this was actually a change that was made due to some FDA requirements. And so we have put this into our IFUs. And how this is tracked, that is up to the facility, what they already have in place. So we don't have any requirements on there on how you do that. Here you see another picture and also a picture of the appendices, where to find that. And recently, we have launched an extended use program where some instruments were gaining some extra uses, and also with that, some extra reprocessing cycles that were put on top. And again, the same rule of thumb still stands. It's the number of uses plus the number of reprocessing cycles. And so there have been, over the years, many enhancements and improvements which allowed us to validate those new numbers. And so what I would like to highlight here as well is that this is not currently in the book of the appendices. We have an addendum to attach it to the appendices. So that's why I just want to highlight it. There are 2 different documents that go together, and where you find also the changed number of uses. And then that leads me now to my last point, some very simple best practice ideas, but they are quite powerful, and I hope that you find them useful. So one, and we talked about this already, keep the instrument moist during and after the procedure. And this has a huge impact on the reprocessing. And you've seen the caked instrument where the blood has already dried quite heavily. They are so much more difficult to clean than if everything is kept moist. It allows faster and easier cleaning. It also makes sure that maybe not as abrasive techniques have to be used. If you imagine you have an instrument and you have to shrubble with a lot more power when it's difficult to clean than when it's easier to be removed. That improves the efficiency of the CSSD, and also people don't have to spend as much time on cleaning instruments, and so there's also a saving of resources and the time of your team members. Here a quick reminder of the wipe, wet and wrap, and then also after the procedure we have the priming step to make sure that the shaft is being kept moist, and that is flash port 1. And then also keeping the tip moist is, you can use a wet set, you can use a towel, or you can use a spray, depending on what you want to use, but that is very useful. Now, another area which goes in line of what we're talking about here, it's also looking at your trays. How many instruments are in this trays? In your trays, are all those instruments always used together? And so it's limit the tray content to what actually is used together, and peel pack the instruments that are not used as frequently. That has numerous advantages. One, it's often easier, depending on the tracking system that you have, to track peel pouches, and then also, or the lives of peel pouches, and then also when you are in the OR, peel packs are usually only opened when they're actually needed. So you don't have the extra instruments that you would have if, let's say, and I'm just picking an example, if you have 10 instruments in a tray and only 4 are used, all the other instruments, they have to be reprocessed. So this will also reduce the amount of work that flows through the reprocessing department. Then Yuri talked about this. It's less waste of the instruments when they have reached the end of their reprocessing lives. And overall, this just saves a lot of resources with some very easy techniques. And this is having a conversation with the CSSD together with the OR, how they would like to organize that, what makes sense, what actually is required for the procedures, and then to see how the trays can be organized to make this work. And yeah, I would like to give you, towards the end of my presentation, some information on how to contact us. So we have an email address, SRS-EMEA, where you can contact us for questions. Our customer service team can be contacted, and also electronic IFUs can be requested with us. However, and that goes into the next slide, here's also our customer service number and again, our email addresses. But we also have a web page where you can download the manuals directly. You can see the web page here. And I would also highlight the intuitive learning, which you can set an account up if you are a Da Vinci customer. And there you find also some content on the CSSD. It will be based on the IFUs, and there are some videos that you can watch and which will help the reprocessing. And with that, I have actually reached the end of my presentation. I just want to basically say one last thing, that this is the status or the current stand of our IFUs. They might be changing. So especially since this is a webinar, it should be used for this time. Okay, then let's go if there are any questions.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine, for our excellent presentation. I would raise the first one, that can you advise if there is any guidance towards insulation testing during reprocessing, and if there is any recommendation for tip protectors?
Thank you for the question. So there is no advice on insulation testing, and actually it is currently not performed. And in regards to tip protectors, we don't have specific tip protectors that we recommend. If you validate any tip protectors, that is up to you, but we have neither a yes or no on tip protectors. We haven't included that.
Okay, good. Then there is a next one. Can we use an ultrasonic in the automated reprocessing?
Yes, you can. It is not mandatory, as I mentioned before, but it certainly can be used, and many customers are using an ultrasonic before the washer disinfector step, indeed. Yeah.
Good, and then I could raise this one. Can the reprocessing in the OR be skipped if the reprocessing in the CSSD starts within 30 minutes?
Yes, according to our IFUs, if I can go back to the slide, it has to start within 60 minutes. So if the process is really smooth, then of course it can. But I would say sometimes there are delays, and if there are delays we have to account for, it is always good to ensure instruments are being kept moist.
Good. Then there would be still one I could raise. Where can we find the reprocessing instructions for the instruments?
You can find the reprocessing instructions on the manuals webpage, and you can download them from there. There is a section on reprocessing IFUs, and there, when you click on that, you can see all the different IFUs for instruments, endoscopes, and you can basically select the one you want to download. You can also, if you are a customer, contact your distributor or the customer service team and get a manual copy from there as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that we can now there isn't any other questions in the chat, so Yuri, if you want to, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. If there are no any further questions, then we have run this webinar a little bit faster than we thought in advance, and thank you very much for all of you attending. And would like to remind you that if you still have some questions after the webinar, then we are more than happy to answer the questions. And as said, we are still going to have a look at all the questions that you have sent or typed into the chat box during the presentations, and we will get back with a certain kind of a webinar package afterwards. And then, Hanna, do we still have like some handouts in that you can perhaps download now already at this stage? Or what customers can download from the handout section?
Yes, I would say that this is given after the presentation.
Okay, and well, of course, wanting to thank Bart. Bart, hello. Yes, thank you for a great presentation. And then if you have any questions to Bart as well, then please send those in and we will give them to Bart. And as Bart was telling, then he would like to get and see you in Brussels next year when there is an event, a global event. And Christine, thank you for wonderful presentation. Really a lot of things there, and we all know that it's hard to explain everything in half an hour or 50 minutes or something like this, but at least I was learning a lot of things from there myself, and then hope that also some of the other things during today was interesting for all of you. And then would like to say from our side that we would be more than happy to provide some samples if you would like to test the peel pouches in your facilities if you are not using them today. And thank you for your time today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day.